So we have our first college football ranking, and we get to see 1 versus 3. We have the Tennessee Volunteers facing the Georgia Bulldogs. It is an 8-point spread. Tennessee getting the early nod. Like I said, they are number 1 currently in the college football playoff rankings. We talked about that in another video. But are you surprised by this Tennessee Volunteers team as we get into the point of the season where you have to acknowledge they're an elite team? They've earned where they are.
They are great. They are great. And look, I still walked away from Alabama, Tennessee, and said to myself, I can't say that Tennessee's a better team than Alabama. Coming out of that game, Tennessee beat Alabama. I don't know if Tennessee's a better team than Alabama coming out of that game, but I think it's more of a semantics argument at that point. There are 3 really, really good teams in the SEC. There's really only 4 really, really good teams in college football this year, and 3 of them happen to be in the SEC. And Tennessee has been really, really interesting to watch this year. And I really hope that we're not headed for some sort of like letdown where they lose a dumb game to like South Carolina or something. But they've been incredibly, incredibly fun so far this season and have been one of the best teams.
I think they're putting to bed the something dumb opportunity because they had an opportunity to do something dumb against Kentucky and ended up putting up 49, 50 points on them this past weekend. They didn't even give Kentucky a chance. I know that you're a big fan of Will Levis. Will Levis looked awful in that game. Tennessee, what they've been able to do with Josh Heupel, obviously lightning quick offense. Their offense is just something special to behold. And I think they're going to cause problems for this Georgia Bulldogs team. I look at this point spread, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a little bit surprised. I know it's a away game for them. I know they have to go into Athens and face the Bulldogs, the last year's defending national champion, who are number 3 in the rankings. I look at these teams and think, okay, if they get into a shootout, if they get into what Tennessee wants to do I think Bennett can play up to the same type of level of what Hendon Hooker is doing this year? Hendon Hooker, by the way, who is now the odds-on betting favorite for the Heisman Trophy this year. Hendon Hooker, who's just had that type of season. Every year we talk about like a guy that comes out of nowhere onto the scene that we're not talking about that's really getting any NFL buzz. And Hendon Hooker is that guy this year. Hendon Hooker might have just played himself into being a high round draft pick. Shock no more. This offense, I don't want to go too high in hyperbole here, but they have some 2019 LSU vibes on there.
So there's one big if to the thing that you said. And you said, if they get into a shootout with this Georgia team, that's a big if. That if is doing a lot of work in that situation.
Georgia's defense is not the same defense it was last year.
You are correct. They are not the greatest defense in the history of college football. They are merely just one of the best defenses in the entire country because, look, I get it. Tennessee is the sexy thing. Tennessee is unexpected. Tennessee beat Alabama. They're number 1 in the rankings right now. And that's not to say that they can't win this game. I'm not like diminishing their accomplishments or their skill set. Evidence says they are a really, really good football team. Georgia is also a really, really good defense. And look, one of their first round linebackers is going to be out for this game, which changes the math definitely in what we're talking about with the Georgia defense. Georgia's also one of those teams that can slide a 5-star sophomore into that lineup to replace him. It will be a diminished product, of course, but Georgia still has created this factory of defensive players that is able to replace Nakobe Dean and replace Jordan Davis and replace Quay Walker and still put out a defense that up until I believe it was 2 weeks ago, I haven't checked the stats recently, but 2 weeks ago had the second best scoring defense in all of college football, only behind, I believe, the Iowa Hawkeyes for some weird reason. And Georgia has been pretty good defensively this season. And
my counter is you don't want to just be sliding people in to try and guard Jalen Hyatt this year or try and stop what Hendon Hooker's been doing. This is not the game where you just want to be sliding people in to try and stop these guys, because these guys are going to play on Sundays too. What the Tennessee Volunteers have been able to do in not only the short passing game, but deep, if they could jump out to a quick lead, I just don't see how this Georgia offense can keep up. It's obviously an offense that's very driven by their tight ends. We talk about Bowers. Their wide receivers aren't as good as they were last year. Their running back situation, obviously not as good when the younger Cook went to the NFL and decided to struggle for Buffalo this year. They're not.
Yeah.
I just don't think that they have the type of offense that can get into a shootout. I think Tennessee is going to force one because as good as I think you're mentioning Georgia is, Tennessee has the way of just punching you in the mouth and taking away your game plan. This offense is so lightning quick that it just has a way of knocking you off what you want to do and making you have to adjust. So I'll be intrigued to see how Kirby Smart and that Georgia defense and that Georgia coaching staff is able to counterplay, because this is going to be a chess match. No matter what you do, this Tennessee Volunteers team is still putting up 30.
I mean, that's what they did against Bama, right? They came out, hit you in the mouth real quickly, and then kind of gave it away later.
And they
like,
tried to
that's
give away that
exactly what
game.
they
You're
did.
right. They tried to give away that game, but I think the difference is Alabama with Bryce Young has the offense that can come back in that game and make that game interesting. Georgia doesn't.
So let's talk about that Georgia offense a little bit, because you're right. It's a lot of no-name guys. It's obviously Stetson Bennett of Stetson Bennett, Kia, Chevrolet, Hyundai, and Mitsubishi Motorships of the local Athens area. Yeah, we still have that Stetson Bennett. They've got Ladd McConkey as their number one receiver, which Ladd McConkey sounds like what old people call their alternative name for getting hit in the junk. You know, someone on the broadcast got hit in the Ladd McConkeys. And then they have Brock Bowers, who's the superhuman who juggles footballs and makes giant catches as a 6'8" guy who was born in 2003. Brock Bowers was born in 2003 for people keeping track at home. This is an incredibly slow moving Georgia team this year. I say slow moving in that their preferred style of football is dominating possession and giving their defense time to hold the ball. That's what they tried to do against Florida. When they're playing teams like South Carolina and Vanderbilt, they can just put up points because they're playing inferior competition. Yeah. But against a team like Tennessee, their preferred style is let's keep Hendon Hooker off the field as much as possible. And that's going to be a lot of bubble screens and a lot of design plays to probably Ladd McConkey, I would guess.
See, what I'm intrigued by, we could talk about games too in which these teams have respectively struggled. Missouri kind of gave a little bit of a issue to Georgia. Missouri was able to generate a pass rush and cause issues for the Georgia offense. I kind of feel like Tennessee could do a similar type thing heading into this game. And if they're able to knock that Georgia offense off rhythm, because if you are going to rely on, as you mentioned, the short passing game, the screen game, then that means that you're going to be a very rhythm-based offense. If you knock that type of offense off rhythm, if they could just force like 1 3 and out, or just a couple drives in which they have to punt, we know how good their offense is, that they can just be able to put up a quick 10-point advantage on this Georgia team. That's where I think that they're going to shine.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that that's exactly where Tennessee wants to spend this game. And I think Tennessee has the offensive firepower to push back against the Georgia defense a little bit. And Georgia, I don't know what their counter is going to be offensively. Now, I think the best offense for Georgia is defense, and that's kind of been their strategy for 3, 4, 5 years at this point, when they chose Jake Fromm over Justin Fields and chose Stetson Bennett the last 3 years to be their quarterback. Like, yeah, they have a couple NFL guys on that team. Brock Bowers is going to be a first-round pick, and he's the best player on that team. McIntosh, the running back, is going to be not necessarily a future NFL, but he's an NFL player. He's going to get drafted at some point at running back. So it's not like they lost James Cook and now they just have an inability to run the football. They just do it with a blend between McIntosh, and you've seen more of Edwards. I think Edwards actually had 100 yards last week. I was watching a bit of that game.
Some younger guys, this will probably be the most meaningful game that a lot of those freshmen played.
First-year players. Yeah, they've been in the program for a couple of years, or they've transferred from other places, but this is the first big game Georgia has played. And I think the Missouri game is the only thing we can lean on, because it's the only memorable game Georgia has really played. Like, you could stretch all the way back to week 1 when they played Oregon. I personally think evaluating week 1 and week 2 results in college football is a futile effort because of how much the teams change. But Georgia's just played a bunch of easy games, whether it's Auburn or Florida, or whether it's South Carolina, who they beat by 41, or Vanderbilt, who obviously they're going to beat the shit out of them because they're an FCS team. Like, Georgia hasn't played anyone. So I think it's not that they you play who you play, and the schedule is what it is. We know Georgia's totally overwhelming this year. It's just the one Missouri game gave us pause because it's the closest thing we've seen to Georgia being vulnerable in 2 years.
It's that old thing about iron sharpening iron. And I feel when I look at this Tennessee team, obviously you could look at their schedule and pick apart wins against Tennessee Martin, right? Same as any. But what they were able to do to an LSU, just again, crushing them 40-13. And then what they were able to do against Kentucky with the 44-6 victory. Alabama, if they didn't give away those late fumbles, I guess you go back to the early part of their season. Sure, the Pittsburgh victory wasn't all that impressive. You skirt by Florida. But for the most part, I feel as though there is sure a thing as you can guarantee to 30 points in a ball game. I would love for this Tennessee team to be at home for me to have full confidence, but I'm still going to pick them nonetheless. Tennessee, lock it in. That's going to be my pick for the weekend. They've earned my respect, and I'm going to give it to them.
That's a good choice. I like that you're going out on a limb and taking the number one team in the country.
Oh yeah, somehow, big time cojones there.
Yeah, big time cojones to take the number one team in the country who's somehow an 8-point underdog. This is a no confidence play for me, but 75% of the bets are on Tennessee. It's a +8 line. So all of the information and data from Vegas is saying to pick Georgia, but I don't know why I'm picking Georgia other than a bunch of guys on defense who I know are going to get drafted in the NFL, but they're names that I don't know because I haven't been watching a lot of Georgia football this year. So I think I'm going to go Georgia, but I don't know why I'm picking Georgia other than respecting that other people have better information than I when they set an 8-point spread, because Tennessee's fun, Tennessee's exciting, and Georgia is also the closest thing we have to like 2012 Alabama. And if Hendon Hooker comes out and throws 3 interceptions, I'd be like, well, Georgia's defense is pretty good, right? So I'm taking Georgia, but I don't know why I'm taking Georgia.
Are we getting 2012 Alabama versus 2019 LSU?
Well, 2019 LSU, that's not fair to that. Let's call Tennessee like 2015 Oregon. Let's call them the Mariota Oregon team. That's the nicest thing I feel like they're better than
that.
That team went to the national championship game. Like Tennessee might not make the playoff.
I think they'll make the playoff. I think that win versus Alabama will be very impactful towards the end.
But we talked about this on a previous video, which you can check out if you subscribe to the Slump Buster YouTube channel, which is if Tennessee loses this game and if Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC championship game, there's almost no space for Tennessee. Who are we going to kick out? Undefeated Clemson? I would personally be okay with that, but I just feel like that's going to be difficult. It's tough.
I guess we'll see, but all right, you're going with Georgia, last year's defending national champions. I'm going with Tennessee, our 2023 future champions. Let's lock it down in the books. All right, guys, drop below your picks for this game, your predictions. We'd like to hear them. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias, and stay safe, happy, and healthy from Juju and Kyle Ledbetter. We'll see you next time.